October 16th, and I've been getting this deer on camera for years. Really old deer, probably like 8 or 9. But I had him. Although I've never had this particular buck on camera before, like mid to late October. Well, I finally found where he lived on October 16th. That's when that buck actually left his summer area, an early fall area, and went to his rut area. And in a 24-hour period, he went over 9 miles.
Wow.
And that's where he stayed for the rut. And that's where he stayed for a long time. Like, he'll stay there just about till winter gets bad, and then I don't know where he goes. I lose him after that. But once again, that's all based on cameras, and it's just, to me, that's just unbelievable. I'm not saying a lot of bucks do that, but then again, it's like you could be hunting that buck. You're planning to hunt him, throughout the whole season, and like without cameras, that deer, you're totally wasting your time hunting that deer in his summer area.
Welcome to the Just Hunt Podcast.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Just Hunt Podcast. It is episode 20. We got a guest tonight, I guess, that I'm pretty excited about. We have Steve Sherk from the PA Mountains. Welcome to the show, by the way.
Thanks.
I think I saw your content, at least maybe on Instagram. Tough to say. It was a few years back, and I remember you were posting, and I think a lot of people know you for the trail camera pictures that you post, or at least have caught a lot of people's attention with that. And I remember you're posting some pretty dang good deer, and then I found out they were kind of big woods, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I was instantly like super interested. I'm like, who is this guy? And like, what's he doing? Like, to get that many, quality bucks and pictures of them in the setting that you're in. So that was, I guess, my first exposure to you. And then I think since then you've been on a fair amount of podcasts. Obviously, John went out and hunted with you last fall and killed a great buck. And yeah, I think you're kind of known for that type of thing. And you have a business. Do you want to talk about your business quick and what you do?
Yeah.
And then actually after that, I'd like to get back into like how you got into this stuff and like how your progression has gone. Because I feel like you're like, you study the woods and you study these deer. You're not just hunting them or, running a business.
Yeah. So I've been guiding variety of game literally since my early 20s. I'm 39 now, but I've been doing whitetails and just whitetails only for like the past probably 12 years. Because I do landscaping and it kind of slows down, going into fall, I, always needed something a little bit extra to do. And I've always had somewhat of a passion where, I just like helping others, teaching other people about hunting. And that's why I like doing these podcasts, write articles, things like that. So that's kind of what got me into the guiding business. I mean, it's not easy where I come from. I'm not going to say everyone that comes fills a tag, but it's definitely, for the right hunter, it's been, there's been a lot of return hunters, people like you guys that just have a passion for the big woods. There's really, if you're a true big woods hunter, there's really nowhere else you want to hunt. So get the right person to come here, and, a lot of them do fall in love with it, and some have success and some learn something, but just being able to share my knowledge and passion with other people, I've had a lot of fun with that for sure.
Is the guiding or outfitting business, is that a family business, or is that something you started? I seem to remember.
Nope. Yeah, that's something I started myself.
Okay.
Yep. That's all. I don't work for anyone or anything. I just have two businesses, my landscaping business and guiding business. Yep. And those are actually all that get the family through. So they're just two. Yep.
That makes sense. So, you said 12 years ago I just feel like, okay, you've taken it to the next level as far as like learning these deer and scouting, like above and beyond most people that even guide. Does that make sense? Like, I know to be successful in the areas that you're hunting, it takes exponentially more work than if you were just like, guiding in like farm country or like on some private farms in Illinois, for example. But I feel like there's more to it than you just, getting clients an opportunity. You actually love learning about these deer aside from the guiding. Is that true? Would you say?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and there's I kind of look at it, even though I'm not the one hunting, but like I develop a lot of history with deer,
Hmm.
just like you and all you guys. So I get to know the deer, and basically I'm doing everything but pull the trigger
Right.
sometimes. And
Yeah.
it's a year-round approach. It's something that's on my mind every day. Certain deer I think of every day, honestly, and going into each season, what can I do differently, or what can I learn from last season, about that deer that will have an impact on this one. So, other than other than shooting them myself, like I do, I get something, not even, I mean, it's always the greatest when somebody kills the deer that you're after, but just when someone has an encounter with a deer that you have a lot of history with and that you've been learning about each and every year.
Hmm.
Sometimes that's all it takes for someone to even have a fulfilling hunt, is just to be like, man, I had a great encounter. Maybe they had a miss or a close opportunity. It's not always the kill, but it's definitely, you put in so much work and throughout the entire year just to maybe see someone get one encounter with some of these deer, and then when it does happen, it feels good.
Oh yeah,
Even
for
once
sure.
again, even if you're not the one, pulling the
Right.
trigger.
Yeah, just for like to give people perspective, just as far as the scale of what you're doing with cameras, just give
Hmm.
people an idea. Talk about that. Like, I know you're running a ton of cameras, but like
Yep.
roughly how many and over how broad of a span are you doing that?
Yep. Yeah. Last year, I ran between 180 and 200, and that's roughly like 100. Yeah, roughly like 100,000 acres.
Brett's doing a
Um,
battery
so,
order if you need some.
That's right.
yep. So
Bulk.
yeah, and honestly though, like the trail cameras,
Holy crap.
I've learned more about deer, bucks. I've learned more about individual deer through all these cameras than all the boots on the ground scouting, all the podcasts and books I've
Mm.
ever read. Like I've learned more from these cameras, all the little bits and pieces of information about the deer in my area. Like you, honestly, you can't run too many. And I know some people would say, you can, but if you learn how to, like for instance, there's times you get a picture of a big deer on camera, especially like a cell cam, and you're like, I got to get in there right now. Where I think a lot of people, they make a mistake. They think they get that picture, and now's the time, when really you're too late. eighty
Mhm.
percent of the time that
Yeah.
happens. But learning how deer enter and exit areas, or their seasonal ranges, where every year during this certain time period you get pictures of deer in this area. All those little things, like you're learning from trail cameras, and the amount of information you get, like you can't get that information any other way, I don't think.
No, I agree with you. I think that's the number one way to obtain information, particularly in the settings that we hunt where
Yep.
there's no visual. You aren't going to see these things, and even the
Yep.
sign is can be deceiving and sometimes subtle or tough to read. It can only
Yep.
tell you so much, um, and it's spread over a wide area. So like the concentration of the sign may not be the same as it would be in other areas. Oh, there can obviously be areas with a lot of concentration of sign. So how long have you been this tuned into this stuff? Like, have you been running this many cameras for the whole time, or like was there a point where you like it kind of switched on for you, or has it been like a gradual build? And I ask this because it's very interesting because, like I said, not many people are this into it and go to these lengths. What was there like a point where you just dove like into it? Was it when you started guiding, or was it previous to that, or like tell me a little bit about that because I'm curious. Usually, people it seems like have some sort of transition or switch that gets them going into this down the rabbit
Yep.
hole, if you will.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely not when I started guiding. I mean, I was running some. I can't remember. Maybe honestly, like maybe a dozen to
Yep.
20 at the most, and gradually it would start to build each year. And another reason why I learned I had to run a lot of them was it was hard to gain people's confidence. Like I might tell a client, I know there's a big deer in this area just by the sign that I'm
Yeah.
seeing,
Mm.
but like when you can show pictures of what's in there,
Yep.
it's not like we're sitting in spots where, hey, you sit in this field or this food plot 2, 3 evenings in a row, and you're going to see this deer enter the field. Like, just as well as me, these things are like ghosts. So you've got to be able to show people what they're after, and just to keep them in the tree longer,
Mm-hmm.
to gain confidence, gain trust in me. So that was part of it. And then, once I started collecting data, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, because once again, this was really before I was using cell cams. They weren't much of a thing back then, but I would notice, because I'd always go through my cards at the end of every year, SD cards, just, I don't know, something to do, I guess. There really wasn't a real reason until I started noticing, like, man, certain dates, like, why am I getting so much, daytime activity, certain dates, or, different things. I'm like, there's gotta be more to this. And not that I knew weather and things like that played a factor, but then I really wanted to hone in, especially on my area in this part of the country, to certain things, weather, barometric pressure, moon phase. And like, when I started doing it, even the first year, it was just phenomenal. Like, the weather data and, all that I collected. And like I said, I've been doing that 8 or 9 years. So there's just so many reasons why trail cameras, have helped me out, and I'm sure a lot of
Yeah.
other people too. But I use them for so many different reasons. It's like, if for some reason, like, and I worry about this, if they ever become banned, especially in Pennsylvania, like, it'll be a huge setback on me, and
Mm-hmm.
potentially my success too. Like, I rely on these things so heavily.
Yep.
It would be a big challenge to go back to the old ways.
I think you asked me the question. Did we have a
What's that?
question? What do you think it would be like if I couldn't run cameras?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
so
had
that
asked. It was a couple weeks ago. We were doing a podcast, and I said, if that happened in New Hampshire, how many of the deer that are up on your wall now do you think would still be there?
yeah, and I think, and I'd like to, and I think you already alluded to it, but my answer was I don't think there'd be many less.
Sure.
I think to find deer, you, you can find bucks and kill them, but to target the age class and size that you're looking for is difficult without cameras.
Yes.
Would you agree with that to an extent?
Yeah, because a lot of what I'm doing is always individual deer hunting. Like,
Right.
because it's not like these things are on every ridge,
Right. Yeah.
So you're always in an area thinking. And, another thing too I find is, sometimes in the summer, like right now, I'll have 4 or 5 mature bucks together, but it seems like they'll spread out because, they don't tend to congregate together, so much throughout, the fall and the
Right.
rut and that. So it's like you can't even find areas sometimes where, unless you're in the more seeking phase of the rut when they're crossing the ranges. But throughout the season, it seems like they're more isolated, and once again, it's hard to hunt, and then you're just hunting one deer a lot of times per
Yep.
se,
Yep.
and it's really hard without these cameras to learn their habits and where they go and all that stuff.
I think it could be really easy if you didn't have cameras to see, some pretty good buck sign, a fresh scrape, some rubs, and, set up on it. And turns out, it's a 3-year-old and a couple 2-year-olds in a year and a half making all that sign. When with trail cameras, you'd know that there's not a buck in that group that I'm interested in hunting. So you'd end up, can see myself ended up sitting on some of these, without trail cameras, some of the sign, and then, maybe that deer walks out, you don't even shoot him, but that's the deer you're after. You just don't even know it yet. So,
Yep.
that's kind of my thought on it. I don't think it's a bad thing. I know people get
Sure.
on. I don't know if they get on you, but sometimes they get on me because I run a lot of cameras. They don't
Oh yeah.
like it,
Oh,
and I'm like,
believe me.
I get that. But like for me, and probably for you and a lot of your guys, like you guys want to find the biggest, oldest deer and chase them. So there's really no good way to do that effectively and consistently without running cameras in the big wood settings. If you're out in the Midwest or out west, you could glass these things, right, and see them and know
Yep.
that they're there and be like, okay, yeah, I saw them, and move in
Yep.
on them. But we don't have the opportunity to do that. So we're reading sign, and yeah, there's big tracks and big sign, but that also can be misleading. It doesn't always, directly correlate to the class of deer you're after. So
Yep.
Yeah, I think they're a
Yeah.
great tool, and it would be a lot different without them.
Yeah, another thing for me too, though, like they're just confidence boosters. Especially, I'm really more of just a mature buck hunter, not always looking for inches, but I don't care
Yep.
what anyone says. Like when you know you got 150 or inch deer in an area or bigger, like, and you're getting it on camera, like that really keeps you glued to the
Yeah.
stand much easier than just seeing a bunch of big fresh rubs. Like it can really help your
Yeah.
mind a lot.
Oh, I agree with you. And for me, it's like motivation, you know. And people talk about, hey, I don't want to know it, deer. I want to be surprised, and that's cool. Like I think that's really like cool. But like I think in our settings, most of the time we're going to be let down and not pleasantly surprised by what walks out if we're just sitting on good sign.
Yep.
Because more often than not, that spot or that camera or that stand location, probably doesn't have the type of deer you're looking at. Like you said, they're not on every ridge, they're not hitting every scrape, so you got to
Yep.
cast a wide net and really locate them. And
Yep.
it's not an easy thing without them. Um,
Yeah, if you don't mind, one thing
yeah,
I will add too, that I've learned, because a lot of people in my area are running, a lot of cameras too. But what it's doing, it's actually helping more than hurting, because hardly anybody's shooting small bucks anymore. Like when
mm,
everybody sees what's out there,
yeah,
their target, they're only, even tags aren't even getting filled because they're passing up small bucks.
mm.
So that is a positive benefit to the trail cameras, is people are being more selective if you want to have more upper age class deer in your hunting areas. That's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. I think that can be a positive thing for
Yeah.
sure. Um, The only thing I always say, and this is it's not really related, but when you get those like, younger guys that really haven't killed many deer and they're like
Hmm.
passing all these bucks and they've like never really shot them before. And I'm like, hey, dude, like just shoot a couple of, I mean, if you don't
Yep.
want to, do what you want. But I'm like, it's okay to shoot one of those other ones to get you rolling first. You don't have to go straight into like Mr. Big, old big buck hunter, your first few seasons hunting. So, but yeah.
Absolutely.
I think I flipped the switch pretty early on, like in my progression. But like I said, people, it's funny. It's great. Imagine like 20, 30 years ago, if a 16 or 18 or 20-year-old kid was like, "Oh, I'm waiting on a 150-inch 7-year-old, or I'm not shooting." That's it. Like that's the only deer. People are like, What are you talking about? Like, who is
Yeah.
this guy?"
That's yeah. There's probably people that are like that though.
Yeah, now with trail cameras they can be because they know they're there. Um, so I know I like to dig in because I think we can go for a while on it into some of the data you've kind of compiled and analyzed and some of the conclusions you've drawn. It's particularly
Hmm.
interesting to me because I kind of do some of the same stuff, although you're pretty, I guess, organized and formal with it. I did one little study in trail camera data that was basically I wanted to identify the best times of the rut to hunt in my area. So I did a little study and kind of made spreadsheets and came to conclusions. But you seem to do it almost every year with your trail camera data. So do you want to talk about kind of how you do that?
Yep. So most years I only take data from our hunting seasons, when archery season starts to when our gun season ends. And that's roughly like October 1st to December 10th.
Okay.
Most years I only take temperature, because I've never seen a year since I've done this where temperature wasn't the greatest factor.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take the high and low temperatures every day from like October 1st to December 10th. And then I will go through all the SD cards, and I only pay attention to daytime buck movement. Like night movement is so much more different than daytime movement. Even it can even, like, for instance, it could be really warm out. Have a big warm front, and you'll still see a ton of nighttime movement. At least that's what I'll see. So, but I like, for instance, how I do it is I just call like one photo like a sequence of movement, where you might have a buck working a scrape, and you got 10 pictures of them in about a minute. Like
Right.
that's just counts as one
Yep.
sequence of
Yep.
movement. Um, and then basically I just add up all the sequences of movement per each day, note the weather for each day, and then that's what at the end of the season, you look and see where the highs and lows were, and you'll, at least in my area, you'll see every year that temperature is always has a greater impact. But about every 5 years, I'll do temperature, barometric pressure, moon phase, and just kind of always dabble into that a little bit. I did that this past year again, and barometric pressure was number two over moon phase. I think it was probably about three-quarter of the best days of where we had good temperatures. We also had rising barometric pressure.
Okay.
It seems like when we have high pressure,
Mm-hmm.
we always see better movement too. But sometimes we'll have high pressure and it's warm out, and you might see a small spike, but you won't see a great impact. Like, it still seems like temperature is a big deal. Also going on this past season though, and this is something I am seeing more and more each year, the October full moon. Generally, we always see a spike in movement. And then this past season, the full moon was October 17th. And that was our number one day for buck movement during this entire study. But also, we had really good temperatures that day. And we also had rising pressure. So, also, when you throw in everything sometimes, when a bunch of different weather factors and scenarios can all come in at once, you'll generally see an even bigger spike in movement. And
Yeah.
I think that's what we saw this past year.
So, what are you documenting or noting or using all bucks or a particular age class for your data points?
I do both. I'll do
Oh, you
I'll
do?
do
Okay.
all bucks, but then
Okay.
I'll do mature bucks as well. Although it's tricky. Like, if you really want to do a good job, and like I never, at least I'm probably wrong some. Don't get me wrong, but like, if I'm like I'm not sure, even though it kind of looks like a mature buck, I don't count it because
Okay.
I just feel like I want to know for sure if I can note this as a mature
Yeah.
deer to make my data more reliable.
Yeah.
So, even my mature buck photos, I mean, there's many days throughout the entire season, collecting data where there's a lot of zeros, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's just because I wasn't sure if that was a mature deer or not.
So, what are you? Is like what's been sure for you? Like four
Oh
or
yeah,
older,
and
or
just
what?
my opinion, I say 4.5.
Okay. Yeah. I was
For
just.
me,
Yep.
for
Sure.
me, and especially in my area,
Yep.
like that's pretty
Yeah.
darn close to a
So
mature
you're
deer.
okay. So you're okay.
Yep.
That's good. And then I guess the other thing to note, just for people that are listening, is oftentimes cold fronts are accompanied by a high pressure system, of course.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
I like temperature too. I really like it when I see that pressure, climbing 30 point whatever 3, something like that. Then I'm like, ooh. And it seems like the best movement day, particularly and I think up until the peak of the rut, I see a similar stuff. During the peak of the rut, I think temperature, and I think you may disagree with me from your data, but it seems like I do think it still matters. I think it just matters less and less as you get into the peak of that rut.
Well, maybe not to interrupt you, but
Yep.
it might also depend on, like, if you're talking big woods in your area where you have lower deer density than me.
Yeah.
I think your bucks are knowing, like, I have to do this. Like, there's not a doe even maybe on every
Yeah.
ridge where you're hunting.
Right. Yeah.
So they might have to work harder and roam harder.
Yep. Yep.
So you might see a little bit different
Yeah.
data up your way. But yeah,
I
once again, over my way through the entire route, if any day you get warm temperatures, even during the seeking phase, breeding,
yeah.
you're always going to see it. So it could vary, for a
I
lot of different reasons.
I do think that rutting behavior varies dramatically depending on deer density and the ease those bucks have of finding does. I think that's the more I think about things.
Yep.
I think that makes a huge difference. That's not surprising. But yeah, I really like the days, particularly like for us, it's probably before November 10th or 15th. But when I see that cold front coming, and then you get that I don't know, say it's October 25th or whatever, and it's like a high of 52 or something like that, and then you get that rising pressure in the evening, and the next morning it's like 28 degrees, right? And that pressure peaks out at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's in like the high 20s. Those seem like the magical mornings to me because you have that cold temperature and you have that peaking pressure. I mean, I try not to miss those. If I have like a hot spot or a scrape that I'm looking to hunt and I see that thing. I saw what's his name. Uh, Not a big woods hunter, but Bobby Kendall, he hunts in Illinois, the whitetail group. He calls it Magic X Days, and I call it. It's almost like so on weather.com. There's on the 10-day you have a graph, right, and it shows the temperature. There's a temperature line and a pressure line, and it's like when those lines are like about to collide, I'm like, that's when you want to be there. And I think those, in my opinion, those are the two biggest factors for deer movement for sure is
Yep.
pressure and temperature. And like I said, oftentimes they coincide. Although we have seen, particularly like last fall, I remember we saw a lot of like high pressure stuff that was like warm, and I was like, that's
Yeah.
doesn't. And I agree, it doesn't hit the same to those deer.
Yep.
Wh-
Another thing
yeah.
too, I'll say is years when we haven't had a good mass crop or no mass crop at all, we tend to see worse movement. I think it has something to do with fat reserves, where
Mm. Okay.
the
Yeah.
buck's body knows, like, yeah, I mean, I want to go at it, but if I go too crazy right now, I won't survive the winter. So I'll see like years like that, you may only have like 5 or 6 real good movement days, and that might be more in the peak of the rut, where like this past year it was good from mid-October to mid-November. I mean, it was a longer not, and I'm not going to say like it affects the breeding or anything. Like, I think that does are coming into heat at the same
Okay.
time,
Yeah.
but like just the bucks are way more aggressive for a longer period when we have better food in some of
Yep.
these areas.
Have you heard? I'm sure you have of like these. I don't know if they're QDMA or uh, Mississippi State studies where they say that weather has no effect on deer movement.
I mean, I'm always shocked by that stuff.
how
Even
how could
like I mean,
I don't
I
see?
can't
Yeah,
even I can't
I don't
even
see how
like
that. I
have a
don't see how they can come to
conversation with
that
someone like
conclusion.
that, because
They
I
just
would
must have
be
some
I wouldn't even
flaw
know where to
in
go. Like,
the
it
way
doesn't
that
make any
they're
sense to me.
doing it. I feel
It's
like.
crazy. And another thing too, like I always hear a lot of people say, if there's high winds, deer don't move. Once again, I can only relate in my area. We generally see better movement when it's pretty windy out.
Do you? Yeah.
But I also think that in some ways it could even be like bucks that are bedding with wind advantages or things like that, or maybe less secure possibly, and they're moving around
Right.
more. Or I mean, there's a whole. They can also get out of the wind a lot better when there's mountains. So, but in generally, that's when there might be a cold front or some high pressure or whatever. So we we always see way better movement. But I hear so many hunters throughout the country, or you'll read where if it's pretty windy out, don't even hunt. And I'm thinking maybe that's more related to the Midwest, where they have less timber and less
Yeah.
topography. I see really good movement when it's windy here.
Yeah, I don't think it really. I mean, if it's like silly high winds, maybe,
Yeah,
and then I probably don't even want to be out there. But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
if it's windy, I don't think it's a. I mean, it is what it is. I
Yeah,
think they'll
there
move.
was
I've seen plenty of good movement on windy days.
there was only one day, like during the rut last year, that Ross and I were like, we might die if we go sit in a tree today.
Super windy.
So
Yeah, we've had those days.
we decided to just walk around instead. But
So even through the rut, the number one factor on deer movement you think is temperature, like throughout November. Yeah.
I would honestly say, yeah.
Okay.
But and I might not have learned this well enough yet, but it's funny. Like, there was some really good temperature days last year in November, and the movement was good. But I am going to say that, and I could be wrong. This is just a guess, but I'm leaning more towards maybe the moon does have a little more to do with does coming into estrus, or because I'll see this peak a little bit different every year, and I did read up a lot on the moon in the past couple years, and it's funny. It did say last year, based on moon and all that, that at least in this part of the country where I'm at, that you would see more breeding in late October than you would in November, and that did seem to be the case this past year. And I'm only starting to believe this now more than I have in the
Mm-hmm.
past several years, but I am surprised why I see this peak of movement vary from year to year. when, like this past season, we had some really good temperatures, especially about November 10th, 15th. And I know that might be getting a little late, not so much in your area, but um, we didn't, it just seemed like the rut started to die off a little earlier than normal last year
Hmm.
when it was predicted that way.
So,
So,
so you think that peak breeding could potentially vary by?
by moon phase,
Yeah.
with
Okay.
by depending on when the October full moon, hits, or what they call the running moon. I
On a
used to never think that, and
yeah.
maybe I really didn't even think that much of it before this past year. But then when I look at the predictions for my area and I look at the data, the temperatures, and I see that it nailed it exactly last year, it makes me wonder, like, maybe there is a little more to peak breeding having something to do with that full moon.
You know, it's funny you say that, and I don't know if you were with me. I think you were. Were you with me when we saw the fawns?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really early. We were turkey
So
hunting.
yeah, that's right. So this turkey hunting one morning, or was it 2 mornings? I think
Yeah.
I saw 3 fawns. They were in probably within a mile or two of each other. 3 different does with 3 different fawns, and they were all 3 of them were like a day or two old. Like they're brand new fawns.
Yep.
And I kind of figured out what days they were bred, and they were all
Oh,
right around, I think, like November 1st, which
wow. Yeah.
for my previous, thought on that would be that super early.
Yeah.
So it made me think a little bit. Now, of course, that's pretty anecdotal because it's 3 fawns in a small area, so it's tough to really draw many conclusions.
Yeah.
But it did make me think, like, man, maybe it varies more than I thought. And I know it does vary. Like there's
Yep.
definitely does being bred in late October through like early December, really.
Yep.
But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if it's as cut and dry as sometimes we like to make it seem. I think it's like
Yeah.
easy for us to want to put it in a box and like categorize everything, but oftentimes it can't really. It kind of fits in that. It's like an octopus. It kind of gets out and you can't keep it in that small box as much as we want it to be like that. So we can use it in our brain as a tool. But
Yep.
aside from the moon though, if you didn't don't like throw the moon aside, and I'm not saying that it doesn't, and maybe it does. But if you didn't have that moon information, when would you say like the peak breeding is in your area on
Well, once
average?
again, peak breeding, I think in my area is probably like November 7th, November 12th, somewhere in that
Okay.
area.
Yep.
But I will also say that in my experience, where I come from, because we have a decent amount of deer, you actually don't want to hunt. Or, I mean, it's not a bad time to hunt, but
Sure.
I don't find the peak breeding to be as good here, where
Yep.
maybe up your way, where you have lesser deer density, you see more activity. But we actually usually see less activity during that peak breeding phase, and that's more of what I would call a lockdown phase, where just the bucks, or there's a hot doe, or there's probably 60% of the does in heat during that time or something, and they're just easily found, versus they're not really working hard to find them and covering ground.
Is the period right before that you think the best time to catch like a cruising bucket, like the middle of the day? Would you say?
Yep, I,
Okay.
I would totally agree to that. I
So
think
you're
they sense that.
yeah.
I'll also say that if I was to go back and all the data for, like I said, close to a decade of doing this, I would say the best 5 to 7 days is probably about October 27th to like November 4th. Like in that
Okay.
time frame for us, like even last year, out of the top 5 days, there was really good days then, even though the middle of October was the best. But generally in that time frame, if you get the right weather, it'll be phenomenal hunting. But there's been years we didn't get you know good weather in that stretch, and it wasn't. But if you were to look all the years back and try to find the best window, that's probably been our best window.
Are you?
Halloween's really good. Like, it's hard to beat Halloween here in Pennsylvania.
Mm,
It's a special day. Although when you have kids and you got to take them trick or
I
treating,
know.
that's a different story. But it's a good day to be in a tree.
Yep.
are you noticing that similarity throughout most of the areas that you're keeping track of, or are you noticing some subtle or even bigger variances, and like maybe a pocket of does over here is different than pocket on the other side of this mountain or things like that.
Um, yes and no. Like I do have spots where I think the same does do come into heat about the same time every year, where it seems like this area might be better mid-November than that other area that's good early November, and I think that's related to potentially does coming to heat around the same time, but not to a point where like I'm putting a lot of focus into that. I'm not seeing that consistent enough in enough areas where it's like I really got to make a game plan based on
Okay,
that, that data.
that's
So
interesting. Are many guys shooting does in that area?
no, no, that's a big
Okay.
problem. I mean, there's too many does. Although there's some hunters that disagree, but I think our deer population is going up 5-10% every year. Like it, that might not sound like a lot, but in the past 10 years, it's probably. I
Yeah.
mean, it's going up a lot.
What do you
I,
think your buck to doe ratio is, if you had to guess?
The buck to doe ratio is still really good.
Is it okay?
Well, for big woods, I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still think it's potentially 1 to 3, 1 to 4,
Okay.
which maybe that's not perfect, but it used to be really, really bad. Like when I first started hunting, you would easily see 20,
Yeah.
30 doe per 1 buck. So it's
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
way different now. But the antler restriction in Pennsylvania, and
Yeah.
once again, more people running cameras and being more selective. There's a lot more bucks in the
What do you
woods.
think our buck to doe ratio is in? Maybe not in suburbia, but some
I
of the.
actually looked at this now, and I can't remember because this was months ago. But
I think it's pretty good up
I
here.
don't think it's too bad.
I bet it's no more than
Probably similar to
2 to 1. Oh, I think it's better.
You
I
think?
think I think it's like I'd say I don't think it's 1 to 1, but I don't think it's far off, honestly.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I really don't. Um,
Yeah,
I really don't.
yeah,
In some areas it may be worse, but like some of the areas I hunt, I think it's pretty dang good. We don't have a lot. I mean, in general, like we'll have like a mountain and there's like like a big like a few thousand acres and maybe there's like 2 or 3 doe groups
wow.
on that mountain. So like and there may be like 2 or 3 or 4 in each one, and I really think like some of these doe groups, they stay in like kind of localized areas, but they may be in a 200 or 300 acre area, and like that's it. So yeah, I think that's why our rut is probably better in the peak, because I think they have to go further and search harder
Yeah,
between does. I think is probably the best. They're not going to turn around and like be with one for a day or two and then turn around and bump right into another. It's like, oh shit, they gotta cover ground like and really
yeah,
search for them. And I think
I
that's
totally
why we
agree.
sometimes see that really good like midday movement like during those dates. Um,
Yep.
So I just looked up stats from this year or from this past fall as far as the harvest. So buck to doe ratio, I don't know, is it just the beginning of the season, the first week that they go to the check stations and with the
I don't
biologists?
know,
But they said it was around 2.5.
2.5 does to one
Yeah, is,
buck.
is
Yeah,
what they estimated.
I'd say it's that.
33% of the bucks taken were yearlings, 30% 2.5, and
That's where, New
4%.
Hampshire.
Yeah, this.
I remember. Holy smokes, that's so. I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, our yearling buck harvest is like 56%.
Mhm.
And it looks like
Wow,
last year is only 33%. So that's
that's
good.
great. These hunters are changing.
That's
Yeah.
going in the right direction. Yeah. No, it's encouraging. I think it's getting better and better. Well, I think another reason is like these deer are hard to kill in the big woods. So a lot of them, if particular people are like even passing any at all, like I mean, it only takes like a buck to get past once as a 2-year-old, and he can easily slip through to 5 years old. You know what I mean? Like he
Yeah,
just needs to get lucky once and have one guy let him go, and he's good. It's not like he's gonna walk by. Well, maybe where you're at, but at least where I'm at, like I don't. It's not like he's gonna walk by like it's 10 hunters a year. You know what I mean? Like.
yeah,
So I think if people even pass him once or he gets away once, like it's hard to hunt him and kill him. So they could easily get through and get old. Um,
yeah. I also think that public land deer, and I know there's probably people that aren't going to like this, but this is more based on all the different clients I've had throughout the country. they always tell me that the deer that they hunt here seem a lot smarter than what they might hunt maybe in Midwest or some of the places where there's more private land. But I've always kind of took that as maybe it's because public land deer, it's almost like in their DNA that they learn faster because they're pressured harder.
Oh, I'm
It,
sure.
it just seems
Yeah.
like they can adjust. And like you said, a 2.5-year-old buck probably, or when he becomes 3.5 might be more like a 5.5
Hmm.
in some other places. He's had to learn, and he's been through so much, and all through just a couple seasons of life where he becomes tougher to hunt at a younger age.
I think they're all different. I think they
Yeah.
all are different based on their environment. I mean, they're all whitetails, right? But
Yeah.
I think they do vary. Like one
Those,
thing I've seen, particularly like in Alberta,
I was just
in
about to say that.
yeah, those deer are not pressured really very
Mhm.
much. I mean, they get hunted, but not hard. But they don't act like super pressured deer. Like they're really relaxed. Well, I'd say they're relaxed, and I'd say that they move in daylight and they don't act pressured. But the thing that's different is they're so tuned in to any little thing that's off, and they pick up on any little thing, and they're so methodical with how they do it. And I think it's because there's cats and wolves up there. Not exactly where we hunt, but in the general area, that population in that region has been hunted by cats and wolves. And I think that makes a result as a deer that's super keen on sounds and noises and like that type of thing. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas like I don't think honestly like we have some our deer are not dumb by any means, but I don't think they're quite as tuned into that type of thing as the deer in Alberta.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, I think they are just a product of their environment more than anything. So okay, are most of your cameras on scrapes or no? Like what
Yeah,
would
I
you
would say
break
I would
that
say
down?
most, but
Yeah.
the scrape might not be the primary reason of that area. A lot
Yep.
of times, like I'll find something in an area, might just be a patch of oaks, or could just be a really good trail with maybe a signpost rub or something. And then I'll just make a mock scrape
Yep.
because it's a good way to just get a buck to
Yep.
stop, get some good pictures, or maybe an added reason. So I just don't want to emphasize that, like, I just focus on scrapes,
Yeah, you're
but
not finding
usually,
random scrapes and hanging cameras on them. You want to scrape in an area that it makes
yeah,
sense, and that yeah, I'm the exact same way. That makes
exactly.
perfect sense. Okay, so then as you hunt from say opening day through the season, how does your hunting strategy change, or does it as the season progresses and the rut progresses?
Yeah, yeah. Starting with archery, in my area, it seems like if you're not tight to bedding, we see a lot less daytime activity unless you're right around bedding. It seems like a lot of our bucks, first week of October, when a lot of people might be thinking food, were based more on my cameras than anything else. It seems like a lot of our bucks aren't leaving these bedding areas
Okay.
until right almost dark. You don't tend to find them way out in the open hardwoods, feeding on some acorns, 500 or yards to a quarter mile from bedding. Like everything seems to be tight. Unless I will say, if we get even an early October cold front, it's amazing how much things change. Like
Really? Yeah.
these bucks will work scrapes outside of their core area. You might see a buck a mile away,
Jeez.
just cruising at 4 o'clock. And I'm not saying like cruising,
Yeah.
searching for does, but they get the urge those days to go out, make some sign, stroll around. But it's just it's not though overall on average. It's not typical to what I hear a lot of people doing in a lot of
Hmm.
areas throughout the country,
So
especially on a food pattern.
what does bedding preferred bedding look like in that time of year for you?
For us, it's usually somewhere where there's a ton of food, though. That's another thing. I don't want to this to be distracting, but generally there's a ton of browse in these areas. Generally, they're pretty thick.
Yeah.
A lot of times clear cut. But then again, since we're getting a lot more hunting pressure around clear cuts, where, like for instance, one place I see a ton of activity anymore is we have a lot of dying ash from the emerald ash
Yep.
borer.
Yep.
So like you'll get these pockets where there's just a ton of regen
Mm-hmm.
because all these ash trees are
Yep.
dying and there's a ton of regrowth. Like, and I tend to find ash growing pretty good, like on north faces. I probably anymore am finding more bucks on north faces than anywhere else, at least that time of year. Um, and so it seems like these pockets of ash, or if I find a lot of regen on those hillsides, usually find really good buck bedding. But the primary food source, rarely do they bed close to. Sometimes, like, there'll be bucks, I kid you not, that may be bedded 2 miles away from a primary, like Oak Ridge, that they're hitting every night. Like,
So
sometimes it's not real close.
you'll be getting them on that, say, north face on that dead ash regen, and then you'll get them a mile away in like
Or two
oh really you
every
will.
night. Every night. Yep. You'll be
That's
it'll
pretty
be
cool.
like between 9 p.m. and maybe 2, 3 a.m., but then that's it. You never get them there any other
And
time.
how would you ever know that without running a bunch of cameras? You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
That's what
Like
I'm saying. Like
you'd
that,
never
if it
know.
wasn't for these cameras,
Yeah.
and a lot of it's just been luck. Like, I didn't really mean to,
Right.
I didn't strategize that to happen. It's like, but you got so many clusters of cameras everywhere where it's like, holy cow. Like, and even like when John shot his buck with us last year, we had that buck on 5 or 6 cameras within 12 hours before he shot that deer. And it was amazing to follow it. Like,
Mm.
I saw that deer was like a mile and a half away from where he shot it at like 4 or 5 a.m. And gradually I have the deer getting closer and closer to him. It was probably a half mile from him at like 8 o'clock when he shot it a little after 9. It was all based on these cameras.
When you see something just like you described, you see this buck bing, bing, bing. Doesn't that give you a ton of confidence in your trail camera locations and that you're
Yeah,
good at?
absolutely.
Because I
And
see that same thing when I see, and I'm like, I'll be like, maybe I haven't had a picture of this buck in a week or 10 days. I'm like, where is he? Where is he? And then everybody's like, oh, he's there. He's there. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But then all of a sudden, I get him on 5 cameras within 3 hours. And I'm like, man, I think if he was there every day, I'd at least get him on one. Because when he was there that day, I got him on 5. And I haven't had him on any cameras for 10 days. So, like, you start, I mean, I don't think a lot of people are, because they don't run them as extensively. They don't really see that, but I mean, it's cool when you like what you see him like hit all. I'm like, oh, I'm right on that movement pattern. I at least understand that aspect of what he's doing, and it gives you confidence in picking those spots. And that if they're in the area, you're probably going to get a picture of them.
Yep. No, I mean, and that's where, but once again, it's tricky because
Yep.
there's times where, especially with cell cams, where, I'll get a picture of a big deer. That's not always enough for me to maybe, okay, I need to go right in there. But sometimes, for instance, I'm bringing up John again.
Yep.
But I think I even was messaging you last year because I had that buck on multiple cameras, but then I also have it dog and a doe on one camera, and then multiple times on a doe. I'm like, there's a hot doe in the area. And like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a perfect situation where you need to get in there right now.
Yeah.
Like, that
Yeah.
would be a situation. There's no perfect scenario really during the rut than to be around a hot doe.
Yeah.
But I just don't want, I don't want people to think that like, cameras are always, it's not like you get the picture then you go in and kill the deer. Honestly, a lot of times I'll go into an area predicting that buck to show up,
Mm-hmm.
maybe because he did that at the same time last
Right.
year, or certain weather events, without even getting a picture, and then he does show up. Like,
Yep.
that really plays more of an effect than anything else.
Yeah, you gotta use some common sense, and you gotta it's they're a huge piece of the puzzle, but you can't just like only look at them and hunt based on only what your trail cameras are telling you. You have to have some foresight and you have to put some thought into it. But it is cool when you see those deer and you're like, oh yeah, I got them. They're there. Oh yeah, he hit those 3 cameras as he was, he running that elevation line, or he's going up over a saddle, whatever. It's cool to see, like, okay, it gives you confidence. And like I said, and where you put them, and that you're starting to figure out at least a little bit of what's going on out there,
And last year too, a really good story was on October 16th. And I've been getting this deer on camera for years, really old deer, probably like 8 or 9, but I had him although I've never had this particular buck on camera before, like mid to late October. Well, I finally found where he lived. It was about 9 miles away on October 16th. October 17th is when I'm saying I get him 9 miles away in his rut area. That's when that buck actually left his summer area and early fall area and went to his rut area. And in a 24-hour period, he went over 9 miles.
Wow.
And that's where he stayed for the rut. And that's where he stayed for a long time. Like, he'll stay there just about till winter gets bad. And then I don't know where he goes. I lose him after that. But once again, that's all based on cameras. And it's just, to me, that's just unbelievable. I'm not saying a lot of bucks do that, but then again, it's like you could be hunting that buck. You're planning to hunt him, throughout the whole season, and like without cameras, that deer, you're totally wasting your time hunting that deer in his summer area. Like it's just unbelievable how some of these deer make shifts like that.
We've got questions recently that we've answered here on the podcast about that particular topic, and guys are like, I don't know where they go. I can't find them. Like, what do I? And I'm like, you can go look for him a little bit, but to your point, if he's 9 miles away, you're not going to find him. Like, he's not. You're not going to find him unless you're Steve Sherk and are just a maniac with camera. You're not finding that deer. And I've kind of accepted that to the point where I'm like, hey, if I lose a buck, yeah, I may shift it like down up on the other mountain or down in the bottom, or like, go look for him a little bit. But if he's not within like a mile, I'm probably not going to find that deer. Like, you can't. If you think about, like, you mark an X on the map, and then you draw a 9-mile radius around that X, or even 10 miles. You know how many thousands of acres you're not going to find them. It's just like, it's needle in a haystack type situation. And maybe you get lucky, but you have like just a fraction of a percentage of a chance to find him. Unless, of course, he is close and he just shifted a little bit to a food source, whatever. Then you can maybe find him. But he could be a mile and a half. He could be 5 miles. He could be 9 miles. He could be north. He could be south. I mean, it's just like, I don't even it's just almost not worth it. Unless you happen to have a camera already and you know of that area and you get lucky and pick them up. And I've had that happen. Actually, that buck, where is it? I moved him. That one over there, that little tiny drop tine buck. So I had him one year, and then he didn't shift that far, but he shifted far enough that like it was a new spot that I was hunting. And I had him for like 2 years in one area, and I started running cameras in another spot. And I never had him up there early. I had him during like the rut. And then this new camera, I picked him up early, and I killed him early, like in this new, and I'm like, oh, that's where he's been early. It's interesting to see that. But like, I wasn't looking for that deer there. It's just I happened to pick him up there. I feel like it's more happenstance and like by luck that you find these deer and uncover these big movement patterns or big shifts, because it's it's almost impossible to predict it and try to go like find them.
Yep. And another thing I find is like, a lot of the big deer that we hunt, there's certain times of the year when they're more killable than others based on how I know that deer. Like, I might know where he's more active in the pre-rut, early season, late season rut. Like, there's those little phases where it's like, I just have more data, more history, this general area, this particular time during those seasonal shifts. And sometimes I'll only say we're only going to hunt this deer during this little time period because that's when I'm most confident he'll be there. Other than that, I just don't have the confidence, and we're just not going to think about that deer. I think we're wasting our time. So I think that's a good strategy.
I totally agree. I'm the same way, and it's like, he may be even killable a different time of year, 4 miles away, but you don't know about it. So like that's no good. Like, it doesn't matter. And so you can't. I totally agree. I have the same thing. Like, there's certain bucks I know of, and I'm like, hey, we may, get an opportunity of him early season or maybe early in the rut, or maybe it's like he's not going to be really there until late rut, late season. So I think that's people, when they get focused on one deer there and they only have them during a certain part of the season, it's tough because you may only know about them like, say October 1st through November 5th, and then he's gone for the rut. It's like, well, you got to try to kill him then, and then if he's gone, you can look for him, but like, good luck. Good luck finding him. You might. I'm not saying don't do it, but man, that's tough. So I stopped chasing them like that. Like, I'll shift a little bit, but I just stop. If they're not there in the areas that I'm running cameras or I'm hunting, I'm just like, oh, cool. Like, is what it is.
Yep.
Um,
And another thing too, I'll say there's probably going to be some people that are listening to this, and you might get a new deer on camera this summer that you have no history with, and that's another really hard deer to hunt, even if it's a giant. Like, I'm not going to
mhm.
say, once again, like you said, you can't kill it, but you have no clue the different seasonal shifts and what that deer is going to do come hunting season.
Mhm.
Yeah, you might be able to stay on them, but also the more pressure you put on that deer and looking for them, and that it's probably only going to make it worse. Where, like with all the cameras I got out, a lot of times I just like to just sit back and not even
Yeah.
really think much about that deer, and just let all that data pour in at least one season, and then if he makes it, because a lot of them do in my area, that I'll base next season off of pretty much what I saw him do that past season. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be like clockwork, but you're going to feel way more confident hunting that deer with a year of intel if you do have that. Or even sometimes just a few pictures throughout the entire season and just noting where that deer was at certain times.
Yeah.
That can be just enough. There's been many times we've had just one picture of a deer at a certain time of year when we felt that was enough clue for us to maybe target that deer in that area the next year, and it came back to that area around that same time. So that usually works better.
So you're seeing annual patterns too, then?
Oh,
You're
big
doing.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean,
Yeah.
unbelievable. Now, every now and then you'll see a buck that 3, 4 years in a row he does the same thing, and then for some reason
Yeah.
he'll just throw a screwball at you the next season.
Yeah.
But I'd say 70% are pretty similar.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I'll just say like his early season area, it's probably going to be the same the next year most of the time. His rut area, which can be big though, but like you'll see him go through the same areas in the
Yeah.
rut again. But I don't see it like I get so many people that are like, oh, you see the buck on the same day, almost the same time every year. No, I don't. I rarely see it like that easy. But
Right.
yeah, I'll know he's in that 2, 3 square miles, at least for us. Like he's in there somewhere in the rut, and he'll come and hit this scrape probably 4 times in the rut during daylight. But that's a 30-day window we're looking at here, so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
hard to say exactly when.
How
Yeah,
do you
like
think?
I
Go
was,
ahead, Matt.
I was just gonna say, I've talked to you before. It's like when you're telling stories about a deer and you say like he's there, how many pictures you're actually getting of him? You say it
Right.
might only be 2 or 3 over a time period.
Yeah, maybe a 2 or 3, but then I
To
know
know
he was there last year, and it's a
Right.
similar, right? It start to build, and you start to recognize stuff, and as you get to know different areas and how deer react and different deer personalities, you can kind of make assumptions. I've actually figured out some of these areas that I hunt that I need less cameras than I used to
Sure.
monitor them.
Yep.
I'm like, man, if I have one on this like main trail or pinch point, and on this scrape, and that scrape up there, I can get a pretty good idea of what's happening. What level of pressure would you say the areas you hunt have? From
Um,
and I'm just like, you're honest from your experience, what would you say it's high, medium, low? Like, what would you say?
the areas I hunt generally low.
Okay.
But I think the pressure, like I monitor the pressure just as I'm scouting hunters just as much as
Yeah.
I'm scouting deer. Like I hate hunting places with a lot of pressure.
Okay.
It just makes it so much harder.
Okay.
It, but also there's sometimes where I think bucks are still super confident they may live in some nasty thick area where even though there's pressure on the outskirts that they're still there, but still tough, extremely tough to kill in those areas.
Interesting. So, okay. What about, does that change at all during gun season, or would you say the same thing?
Our pressure is only bad, honestly, the first 3, 4 days of gun season. And then, I mean, I'm talking like you get late into the first week, and we only got a 2 week season, but late in the first week, second week, you could drive 10, 15 miles in some popular areas and not even see one vehicle parked. Like that's how low it can get then.
Holy smokes.
But the
Okay.
first, it's funny. I mean, opening day, like I won't mention the name of this one road, but it's a
Sure.
pretty popular area, about a 15-mile long road. There's been years I've seen 100 vehicles opening day in this 15-mile stretch.
Jeez.
And then, but I'll even say the second day, you'd probably see 40. And then the third day, maybe 15. And then it just shuts right off.
So, when you see that, it's really like extreme spike of pressure out of nowhere,
Yep.
and then it comes right back down. How do the
Yep.
deer react to that? Do they react immediately, and then is after a couple days is it back to normal? Would you say?
No, actually, it seems like
No,
it scares the hell out of them.
really.
It seems like, I will say, about 2-3 weeks after the season. So you're looking at close to a month. It seems like they'll kind of get out of it, but for some reason, like as soon as opening day hits here, our bucks go extremely nocturnal. Uh,
Okay.
I mean, and that's especially on my camera data. Like I want to say even last year, out of 180 some cameras during gun season, probably only 4 or 5 daytime photos of mature bucks out of all those cameras once gun season started. I mean, it just shut
Through
tons of night
the rest of
photos.
the season?
Yeah, all of gun season. I bet you all of gun season, 4 or 5 mature buck photos in the daytime, and that's it. And literally just, and the opening day was the most of them, and after that it just, I mean, hardly any mature buck photos, and
And
some
so
of
So
the
you guys
cameras
are
are still in.
are you the first Saturday after Thanksgiving is when you
Yes.
open?
Yep.
So that's like right at the end of November then.
Yep. Exactly. Goes into the first 2 weeks of December.
But
so uh,
It's,
so how are you adjusting from that point on what you do?
yeah. Once again, it's similar to the early season here. Is you're paying attention in a lot of these deer, I know roughly, but you're hunting near bedding. I'll check a lot of cameras that time of year in like food sources that I know they're hitting at night, and kind of banking off the bedding areas like on the fringes of those areas.
Mm.
But sometimes it's tricky too, because I told you before that some of these bucks are traveling a couple miles at night to some of these food sources, then going back. But some of these bedding areas, though, like even like, because the past few years I've hardly had any time to archery hunt, so I've been solely hunting like buck beds the past 2 gun seasons, and it's amazing how precise some of these buck bedding are, or even beds are in gun season. Not saying every bed I check has a mature buck in it, but like the buck I got 2 years ago, it was the first bed I checked for that individual buck, and it was a real remote point, about a mile back in. Nobody was hunting, and this spot really only gets used in gun season. But I will say, you go into this spot 2-3 days after opening day of gun season, it's very likely on that point there's going to be a big deer there. Like they have spots that they go to that they've learned that they don't get pressured. They
mhm.
have visual advantages, sometimes wind and thermal advantages. Like the mature deer here know right where to go when that happens. We also have bucks for sure that the day after opening day, we get them 6-7 miles away on new cameras.
Holy smokes.
That they'll shift. I kid you not, they know exactly what's going on. It's unbelievable what some of these deer are doing. Their brains are beyond what some hunters even think. That they know exactly that this is gun season.
That's like people's biggest fear when they talk about, I don't want to go into an area and like blow a deer out because he might be 7 miles away and I'll never see him again.
Well, I guess it does happen in
But
PA.
I will say, what's weird is when they shift to these spots, they tend to not leave these spots though. You like, I'll go in
Okay.
and know that there's always a big deer here in gun season, and mainly it's because it doesn't get pressured. Sometimes I'll bump him and go back there the next day, and he's there again because he just has a confidence in that
Yeah.
spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and there's not. I also think as they're walking around at night when they leave and go on the fringes of these bedding areas, they're smelling the ground for other human scent, and when they're hiking, half mile, or walking a half mile here or up on this next ridge, and they're not picking up any human scent, I think they're still confident, like this is where I want to be,
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
other areas where it's just human scent everywhere. I really think that plays a factor.
I wonder if your rut was a little bit later, how that would affect everything. I'm just curious
Did he
because
freeze?
it seems like, do you see much rutting activity after that gun season starts or no?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get a hot doe, there's usually a buck on her, but it's not something that you're like banking on.
Yeah.
It's a sporadic situation. Um, it's one of those things like sometimes I've seen it in the snow before where I can almost positive that's a doe track and you see a big track on it, or you might see where he chased through a little bit, but it's pretty much died off by that time of year.
Because I know right to the first week in December, we still, I mean, you can count on bucks still cruising. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not like they did, 2 weeks before. Still cruising and still on does, like through the first week in December. And I wonder if you're just starting to tail off enough
Yep.
and the pressure spike is dramatic enough that it kind of just ends things to an
Yeah,
extent. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
That's what
Yeah.
it's exactly right. Like it's a combination of that. Like these bucks are already wore out. Then
Yeah.
you throw all that pressure in there, and they're just like, screw that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to lay low,
time
and
to
that's exactly what they
Time to
do.
pack it
They
up, boys, and head home. See, we
Yep.
because I don't see that, but in our gun season starts like November 1st,
Hmm.
and I would say we have low to moderate pressure, but I think it's more spread out than you,
Hmm.
and I think our rut's later. I actually think most of the pressure is before the peak of the rut around here. I think most of the gun pressure is before the peak of the rut, and
Yeah, that
so.
makes
And honestly, by the time it's the peak of the rut, I'd say it's low. Like, there's not many people in the wood. There's still some, but not as many. Um, yeah, that's interesting. It's just interesting. I really think pressure, rut timing, deer densities all plays into how this stuff works, and it's cool. Just interesting to hear the different
Yep.
areas and the different factors that affect it.
No, it's I mean that's the thing. Like I share a lot of information. I mean most of it's helpful, but then again, like I can't tell you the best time to hunt in certain states,
Right.
or
Yeah,
and
because you're
that
not
can
there.
vary
Yep.
from year to year too. And
Hmm.
although you might see it more consistent where you're at, but I've in my area, I'll have a client that he'll come and do really well at a certain time, and he'll be like, "I'm booking that same week next year," and then he comes back, and it's not the same situation. So,
Yeah.
that's just hunting. It's there is no for sure time here that I'm guaranteeing anyone that they're going to hit things right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like two times up here where I feel pretty consistent with. And that'd be like the first, say, probably 10 days of our archery season, which is September 15th. So it opens pretty
Oh yeah,
early. They're pretty consistent that time if you can find them.
yeah,
And fair amount of daylight, too. They're almost still on the summer program, kind of just, not really caring about much. And then that third week in November, I think, I mean, it's pretty good almost every. Although last year it wasn't as good. It did seem like once again the second week was just as good as the third week, I would say, which is not normal.
right.
But of course, when I say it's not like it's terrible, oh, it's great one week back down. It's a bell curve, of course. So like it's always good, starting late October and it gets better and better and then it kind of goes down, but just because you're not at the peak of the belt doesn't mean you can't have some awesome hunting. So it's tough to say exactly, but and I think the more and more that you do this and I do this and everybody just pays attention to this stuff, you start to see stuff. And there may be a year, like you said, where it's like, hey, this stuff isn't like, it's not the rule. It's just a general guideline. And it doesn't always work the same every year.
Yeah,
Um, I think like even food sources, I think can affect that stuff and weather.
oh,
Like,
huge.
like weather before, even weather last year. Like if there was no food and we had a tough winter, they just may behave differently going into that year because of their body condition and like the whole thing. I think it all affects it.
Yep. Even habitat is going to. I mean, I would say all this rain we're getting is helping more than it's hurting, but you can have drought conditions. Like
Hmm.
everything's impacted by the environment.
Yeah.
It has to do with whitetails, and that's why really, yeah, you might see rut similarities every year, but overall, I still say that every year is at least a little different throughout the entire season. Like there's always going to be different things that you're going to deal with each season that weren't exactly the same as the last one.
Yeah.
So you always got to be willing to adapt.
What do you see for antler growth? I know because you're able to follow deer till sometimes older ages.
Yep.
Do you see a trend um, at a particular age where the deer in your area are peaking for antler growth, or is it kind of all over the place?
Um, I honestly, it's weird. Like I've seen a lot of the biggest deer in my area peak at probably 4 and 5 years old,
Okay.
where um, you would think that those 6 and 7 year olds would be a little bit bigger. But I've seen a lot of big 4 and 5s overall than
Okay.
any other age in my area. And I also think that I do think that some of these really old bucks actually rut a little harder and get more stressed out. I think some of these bucks coming off 3 years, going into 4 years, like they're just blowing up. They're still pretty healthy, and it seems to be a peak in my area a lot.
I like that better than our situation because they get bigger faster. I feel like I just keep waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting year after year. I'm like, come on, grow.
Yeah,
Sometimes it takes so long for. I'd rather have it that they peak earlier, honestly.
yeah. I mean, and I've seen it the other way though.
Yeah,
I've had a few different bucks over the years that I kid you not are probably 8 or 9, and they just
yeah.
I've seen bucks get about 10 inches bigger every year too.
It seems like there's a lot of places where they get to their full size at 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
It is not the case here. Um, Almost never, to be honest with you. I don't. I mean, I can't think of. I'm sure there's one, but off the top of my head, a deer that like wasn't substantially bigger at 5 and 6 than he was at 4. I shouldn't say substantially. Sometimes they just don't get very big, right? But I don't think I've ever had a deer that was, say, he was a 140 at 4, and then was 145 at 5, and then was like a 135 at 6. Like
Hmm.
it's always seems like it's just trending up until 7, 8, 9 years old. At
Wow.
least for us, yeah, that's what I've seen at least. Um,
Yep. No,
just in general, I
we
mean,
rarely see
I
that.
could probably think of one deer or something like that, but and sometimes it's just like a few inches a year though. Like they're just like maybe they put on 2 or 3 inches every year from 4 to 8 or something like that. But you multiply that by 2 3 inches or 4 inches
Right.
by 4 or 5, and you start to really amount to something. So it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting. I always wonder if it's like nutrition related. Like I'm wondering if our deer just aren't getting. I don't know. I'm just curious about that.
I do think for us, and I mean, this past winter we had a bad winter, but it was pretty much over by early March. But
Yeah.
overall, our winters seem to be a lot shorter. They start a little later, so I think in the long run, a lot of our bucks really aren't getting that beat up in the
Yeah.
winter anymore. Like, and I think that plays a huge part in it. Going into the spring, still with a little fat on the rear ends, and being able to already put some of that nutrition right into the antler growth quickly. I think
Do you,
that helps.
do you see certain areas certain years it seems like antler growth is better than others?
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, this season before I thought was probably the best we had in at least 5 years. But we had a super mild winter, and then we had a really green spring. I think once again, similar to this spring though, I think a good wet spring with a ton of browse. I think
Yeah.
that plays a huge part into antler growth. Um, and I don't know if water like plays as much part into the growth as far as drinking it, but like just having a lot of food everywhere where they
Yeah.
don't even have to hardly move to eat or just browse everywhere. I really think that helps a lot.
I think that mass crop is a big. I'm sure that the browse is a big deal.
Hmm.
I think that probably plays into it. But what I think, my theory is where we have mass crop, because up north we don't really have as much, but where we have oaks, I'll say, which is like, unless you're like the far northern New England, if you're like mid to southern, whatever, something like that, you probably have some oaks. And I feel like it's not the oaks, it's the oaks the year before. So like if there's a really heavy mass crop like and there was last fall, I think this year will be a good antler growth, because what I think happens is I think they go into the winter
Yeah.
in a far better condition, so they come out ahead in the spring and they can, allocate more resources to antler growth. Whereas
Yep.
if they went into like because we had two back-to-back poor mast years. 20 22 and 23 are really poor. And I feel like last year was a really poor antler growth year after back to back, So
Sure.
I'm wondering, it'll be interesting to see because like a lot of the deer like that I was expecting to like, oh, he's gonna be big next year. He's like, hey, he's a little bit. He didn't really do much, you know what I mean? And so I'm
Yep.
wondering if
Did you see any go backwards that were in that like?
I wouldn't say that's what I'm saying. I don't really see him go backwards.
Yeah,
I
I was
see
just
him.
curious in that
Yeah,
situation.
no, I don't really see him go backwards. Maybe they just don't jump very much. They still get a little bigger, but I'm trying to think. Like I don't really. Yeah, I mean, there's one buck in particular this year. Well, there's like two or three, but there's one in particular that I thought, as a 4-year-old, he was a 5x5, but probably 140. And then last year, as a 5-year-old, he was maybe only 5 inches, but he was a 6x6. And he was one though, and I had him at 3-2, and he was one though that you're like, this thing's just about to explode, and like he didn't last year. He got bigger, and I'm wondering if like at 6 with that good mass crop last year, maybe this is the year. And it's been, about the wettest spring I can remember. So maybe this will be the year that we see a lot of giants running around. And we're big on body weight too up here, and everybody weighs their deer, and I think I see the same thing with like we have like the 200-pound club, right? Like if you shoot a buck that dresses 200 pounds, it's a big deal, and they keep track of like statistics on that. And I think I don't think we had many the last couple of years. I don't
I have no
remember exactly what it is or if that's true, but I know that like some years we kill like. In New Hampshire in particular, just because that's where I live. I mean, Maine and Vermont keep track of it too. But some years it's like we kill triple the amount of 200-pound bucks that we did,
Yep.
previously. So it varies a lot. It's not like, 200-pound bucks are up like 20%. It's like, no, it doubled. So
Yep.
I think a lot of that is depending on the winter severity and then the food and the condition they're in going in. I think maybe that's why they grow slow up here, is because
And I would say
we have that
your
winter.
bucks are probably rutting extremely hard, like because of the range that they're
Yeah.
traveling. So they probably go after the rut. They go into winter pretty stressed out a lot of times.
Do you see bucks losing like a crazy amount of body weight during the rut too, or
Oh
no?
gosh, yeah.
You do, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no doubt. I would say. I mean, there's 200-pound deer here, especially in the early archery season.
yeah,
But I bet you a lot of those, like if you kill 160 to 170-pound buck, later in the rut or in gun
yeah,
season, that deer was pushing 200
yeah,
pounds
for sure.
early in the season. But
Yeah.
we don't see after the rut. I don't even know anyone that's ever killed a 200-pound deer here in gun season. They got to
Oh,
be before
really?
the rut. Yep.
Yeah,
So, but they definitely lose a lot of weight. But I mean, our deer are certainly probably somewhat smaller than your northern bucks,
yeah.
but still, they lose a lot of weight, big time.
That's interesting. So where I'm at, I feel like I have two type of genetic like types of deer. I feel like I have these bucks that are, and they're usually the ones with the bigger antlers, but they're like almost like more athletic looking, like a deer, like they're leaner looking deer, if that makes sense. They usually have like a smaller foot, and we pay attention to that because of tracking. And they're like only ever get, I mean, they may dress at 185 or 190 pounds, like, at the peak, but usually they're like in that 160 to 170 pounds dressed. And then we have these deer that just seem like they're just huge necks, huge shoulders, big long things. And those are the ones that we see that dress, but they almost have a different look to them. It's almost like different. It's like I almost think we're at a place where like two different genetic or different areas come together, if that makes sense. Do you see that at all? Like, or do you see do you see most of your bucks similar? Because like I know where I hunt in Ohio, they all look pretty similar. Like most of the bucks are pretty. It's like they're cut from the same cloth, if you know what I mean.
No, I think I see that a little bit
Do
here.
you?
I don't know if I pay a ton of attention to it, but I've seen like follow bucks over the years. That a year and a half, he had a buddy. The buddy was a spike, but he was a 5 point, same
Yeah.
age. But then you could see a big difference in the body. Like I always see a huge difference in bodies size here at a young age when one buck is like a spike or a 3 point, and one buck generally has better antlers. Like a lot of times there is difference in body size.
Interesting.
But I will say, like most of the big bucks that I've watched from a young age had way more points on their antlers than a lot of these other deer. At least sometimes it's hard to tell too and follow a buck at a young age. But I
Yeah.
have followed deer, especially I've followed, kid you not, year and a half old 8 points, little basket rack eights, but then they blew up to be 150-inch deer by the time they were 4 years old.
Yeah.
I see that here over the years, definitely on many occasions.
Well, I had one too that I know is a year and a half, and I followed him till 5, and he didn't show up No, he didn't show up last year, but the previous year, so he would have been 6 last year. At 5, it was I think another like poor antler growth year, and he like I don't know, he was like 135, and he's like a 8 pointer a year and a half, and he just never, you know what I mean? So it's interesting. We just sometimes they just don't make big jumps. It just takes freaking forever. I mean, I still know some deer that like literally peaked at 10 years old. Like they got killed, and like you can follow them back, and people have known about them. And this guy got their sheds, that guy this way, and that's like, you know what they were. It's like, yeah, 10 years old. He was his biggest. It's like crazy.
Yeah, we had a buck one year. It was 2.5 year old. It had split G2s, probably scored close to 130. It was like a 12 point.
Oh man.
And that deer never, I mean, he got maybe 140, but like I thought that deer, I honestly was telling people, I said, I think this deer is a potential 200-inch deer at
Yeah.
5 or 6 years old. And he grew like 10 inches over the years. And I don't get it. Like
Yeah.
he had the genetics. It must be, had maybe something with food, I'm guessing, in that area. He just was never able to really get the right nutrition to blow up. So every deer can be a little different too, depending on a lot of different reasons.
What's the oldest deer you know of? Like, have you been able to track one like to 10 or anything like that? Or
Yeah, we've had a few 9 or 10. There's some like that deer I was telling you about. It's got to be 9 or 10. That's probably about the oldest.
Okay.
I don't think. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't think a lot of our older bucks honestly get shot. I think a lot of them die of old age, anywhere between like 7 and 10 years old. I
Really?
really
Yeah.
do. Because there's so many big deer over the years that I kept following for years, and got anywhere between 6 and 9 years old, whatever. But then all of a sudden, where'd they go? They're gone. No, never heard anyone shooting them. They're so big, you'd think some of them you would have heard of, and they just disappeared.
I've had the same thing. The same thing. What I think happens, this doesn't explain them not showing up in general, but I think they get to a certain age, and maybe like you're running cameras and monitoring an area that's like good habitat, right? It's a good, like there's usually a good buck in there. I feel like what happens is they get past an age in a body condition where they are like participating in the rut, and they want to fight, and they want to occupy that primo ground. And I feel like they just like move off somewhere and just like they go to retirement. You know what I mean? And then we lose them because they're in a place that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't explain them not ever being found or shot, though, because obviously there's probably hunters, in most places. But I've found that like for years and years and years, that buck's there, boom, 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 and then all of a sudden he gets to like 7, 8, 9, boom, gone. It's like, what happened to you? Like maybe they died, but I kind of believe like how you'd think that eventually someone would come across those antlers or that skull laying there or whatever. I don't know.
No, I've seen and thought of that same thing happening before too, and I think some bucks kind of gain the rights to an area, and it might be even a big area, and once they know they just don't have it, the fight left in them anymore, then I think they lose it and they move on, and another buck takes over.
That's what I think personally.
No.
Do you find many big dead bucks?
I mean, they get found. For as many of them that have disappeared over the years, I'm shocked. Like there's many of it, with all the people even shed hunting anymore. It's like
that's
I
what
can't
I'm
believe
saying.
nobody found it.
That's what I'm saying. I feel
Yep.
like for the amount of bucks that disappear and I don't hear about, like it's a
Yep.
quarter of them turn up dead. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like they maybe
Yeah,
just like,
it is. It is shocking. Like I don't know how, because I still think it had big enough set antlers that it shouldn't have been that hard to find. It's not like a little spike
right.
somebody's stepping over in the leaves. But yeah, it's always mind boggling too, and you always wonder. Like you get a deer you've been following, he's 6, 7, 8, and you just always worry every year. Is this going to be the year he ghosts you, and you have no clue where he's at?
Yep.
Yep. So
Yeah. Well, sometimes you're like, when they're like 4 or 5, you're like, I'm gonna really build some history with this deer and like learn about him, and then like start to get to like 6 and 7, you're like, you better kill this sucker because like you may not have many years left with him. Like
yeah,
your
for sure,
window's getting shorter and shorter every year.
for
So it's
sure.
funny. It's cool. It's cool though to have the opportunity to be around, deer that get old and big.
Oh my
It's
gosh,
so
yeah.
cool.
Especially in the type of habitat and the public land and big woods. It's just it's there's just something special about how that deer has to survive from year to year and the way his environment changes and just to learn about how that deer lives, what he does. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
The deer John killed. Did you know how old he was? I can't remember if
I honestly, I don't know exactly, but I think it's 7 or 8. I really do. I think
really.
it's 7. Yeah, I really do. We had a lot of history with that deer. At 3.5, it shifted somewhat. Like we had it in an area for a couple years up to 3.5, and then it shifted about 2 miles at about from 4 to 7, and it stayed in that general area where
Okay.
John shot it. I mean, it's still a big area, but it did
Right.
some kind of shift once it became like 3. So I
That's
honestly
interesting.
think it's. I mean, I'd have to double check because I can't say that it was a deer that we knew the exact age, but it's between 5 and 7, 6, 7, something like that is where I
Yeah.
think it's at. So.
I don't know. How do you even? Are you good at recognizing deer from year to year on trail camera pictures?
I honestly think most of them, but there are some deer that, especially like certain 8 points in that, they can be tricky.
Yeah.
John's deer, though, kind of has a unique tall frame, but
Yeah.
when it was 3.5, it actually had a split G2, and then it
Okay.
never had that again. But I will say last year was its biggest set of antlers, and that might go a little bit against what I said, but it was also a deer that we'd never get in the summertime, but then always would just move into that area like early September, mid September, and then it would just stay there. We had a lot of daylight pictures of it right into early
Yeah.
October. Then it seemed to get nocturnal, but it kind of did the same general thing every year. It was pretty interesting for a while. But also, where he killed it though wasn't. I mean, I think you might have remembered that wasn't even the deer that we were
Right.
targeting. That wasn't the
Yeah.
buck on. There was even a bigger deer in there, but I think he just got a whiff of that doe. He's covering ground and showed up. But that's hunting the rut. That's just how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he saw that bigger deer the first day they went into the stand, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No. And I think what happened was the bigger buck ended up pulling that doe out of that area the next day. We'll see that happen a lot too, where some other intruders come in, and a buck will sometimes try to. I don't even know how far. It might take her a mile or two or
Yeah.
wherever, but they'll try to pull a doe out of an area where they feel they have competition.
Hmm.
But the scent was still there, and I think that's still what helped John out. It might not have been the freshest scent, but
Yeah.
given that October 25th, like that buck's not expecting to maybe pick up hot scent at
Yeah.
that time of year. So he smells that scent, and that's all it took, I think.
For
Because he
sure.
came in on the same trail. Like that buck walked right by the camera, the cell cam that I had of the buck and the hot doe the day before with his nose down, going the same direction. So he was still on day old scent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think once again, that's the first sign of estrus that buck had probably maybe even
Right.
hit that whole season.
Right.
So he got his interest.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think
Yeah, never.
that's what you see in October. Particularly, I don't see that as much over here, far east. Yeah, but it seems like when you get, well, I hear about it in Massachusetts sometimes. I wish I saw that more. I'll say that because I really wish. I just, man, I really just don't see much good stuff until like after the first week in November.
Right.
In general,
Yeah,
like
that's
it
the
just,
rut though. The rut's a little different all throughout the
yeah,
country. You know?
yeah, no, for sure. I wish that it was a little better earlier,
Yeah,
but it gives me an opportunity to maybe hunt, a little bit further west that earlier portion and catch
yeah,
some of the best stuff, which is cool. Well, do you have any? I mean, I've really enjoyed this. I like to
yeah.
geek
Me
out on
too.
this stuff. Do you have anything else? Any other topics you want to touch on that you
Um,
can think of?
I don't know. And I don't mean to maybe be a little bit brain dead, but I feel like we talked about a lot, honestly.
Yeah,
And I know that I'll be in touch with you guys a lot. So maybe even after the season or something, get back on again
for
and
sure.
talk about some more stuff, what we saw from this, upcoming season. But no, I feel like we had a great conversation
Yeah.
for sure. So
Well, I'm glad you keep the records that you do and you're paying attention. That's like I just think great. I don't know. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed, like I said, watching and learning about your findings because I just love this stuff. And I love the data. I really do. I love the data. And sometimes we can't like look at it blindly and go by the data blindly. We got to be hunters, right, and woodsmen as well.
yeah,
But for me, I sure do appreciate it, and it gives me confidence, and it helps me make a plan. And so it's just really cool to see, and I hope you keep doing it. and
yeah,
keep
and the same goes for you guys. Like I'm just as big a fan of you guys because when I see you guys, I see what I do, which is pretty rare content. There's not a lot of that content,
right.
and especially once again in the big woods in the Northeast. So like, I'll be one sad man if you guys ever do something any different. So not that I'm against if you guys travel other parts of the country, but keep throwing that Northeast big wood stuff in there just for me every year, and
Yeah,
it'll help me forever.
I don't ever plan to get away from it.
Yeah,
I'm sure I'll do some other stuff, mix it in, but yeah, no, I mean, we got some cool new things, new directions too with the big woods. I think we're gonna shift a little bit,
great.
change it up a little bit, but no, I don't think it's going away. So
Great. Awesome. I can't wait. Can't wait to see the what this season has to show for on video, and I'll be uh, I'll be one happy camper.
well, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this one. I know I did. I mean, honestly, Steve's been a guest that I've wanted to have on. We haven't been doing this long, but I knew he was one of the top guys that I wanted to get on to talk about this stuff because it definitely fits in with our style of hunting and our topic of conversation. So, thanks again, Steve, and we will see you guys in the next one.